Hi. We got the Festiva in the shop. We've got the motor that was in it over here. I got to pull the trans off. We have a clutch. This is a pressure plate, throw-up bearing. And I haven't opened that box, but the clutch disc is in there. It's a 6-puck sprung hub clutch. It's supposed to be good to like 300 some odd horsepower. This is a trans that came out of the car. We won't be using that. We're going to be using this trans over here. This is a Mercury Capri XR2 turbo trans. It's called the G25 is the code for it. It's still a cable, so it's going to work just the same. It's supposed to be a little stronger. They're not quite as weak, but they're not indestructible by any means. But the car's in the shop. We're going to try to mock up the BP, figure out what kind of clearance issues we're going to run into there, what we're going to have to modify. And I know for sure that motor mount has to get modified, which is laying somewhere.
I think it's in the car.
But we're going to have to chop on that a little bit to make it work. Apparently we have to modify that trans mount and this trans mount. So pretty much every mount has to be modified slightly. And somebody said I'm going to have to run a Honda half rad to make it clear. Nice and squeaky. The Honda half rad apparently sits up underneath here rather than sitting behind here, because the BP is so big compared to the B3 that you run into clearance issues. So we'll see. There's the mount for the, yeah, that's the bracket for the motor mount. So we're gonna have to either modify that or the actual motor mount, which is at my house, which is perfect because that helps us so much. But we can get something done while we're here today. But Festiva's in the shop. We're gonna try to get the motor mocked up and see how far we can get on that. Everything should be pretty well plug and play. Motor's in. We got the intake on. This is a Skunk 2 intake. It normally faces that way because that works great for a Miata, but this is not a Miata. So we had to flip the plenum. The motor mount, I figured out how you have to cut it and get it modified. We're gonna have to slice the motor mount, which I have one at the house. We're actually gonna do it on, not this one. But you basically cut it here, and then you get a piece of plate ever how long, and then you shift this over. Down here there's 2 holes that your bolts go to, or 3. So there's the alternator bracket that sits here, and the alternator camps out like right in here. Well, there's 2 bolts that hold the mount right here. This mount actually camps out right down here underneath the intake. Well, the problem is this tab right here for the water pump is actually in the way, so it can't go all the way up against the block. So you have to space this off of the block to make it work, which I figured that out too. So we're gonna space that. I still have to either hammer or cut on the frame rail to get the pulley to have plenty of clearance, and that shouldn't be too big of a deal. So we got the throttle body modified because it did have this awful thing on it. This is an IAC, which I won't be using because I don't have air conditioning, so I don't really care about having an idle up valve, and that's all this does, is it idles the car up and compensates for the load from the AC when it's at idle. And then these have coolant that come through them, and they're supposed to cool this valve to help it run. So we blocked that off. We got a piece of metal, thin metal here, and then we cut it and screwed it down here to where it blocks off the entire IAC plate. And then we have room, because when this goes on, there's not a ton of room, even with the even with the plenum flipped, it's gonna sit like this right here. With the plenum flipped around, you can see how little room I have between my brake lines and where that IEC would have been on the bottom of it. And still yet that TPS is still hitting that brake line, which I can bend a little bit, not a big deal, but the plug is up top, so it's super easy to get to. The throttle bracket is gonna be pretty simple to get routed. I don't think it'll be too bad. So we're closer than we were. And I guess we're gonna try to figure out how we gotta modify the mounts. Jiggle it now, there you go. That's what I'm looking, yeah, that's what I'm daggone. Hope these welds look good.
Daggone.
So we got the bracket, the spacers all ground down, however you want to say it. And then we got the alternator mocked up. It does look like it's going to work. I did have to cut this tab off right here. There's a tab that hung out here. There was a tab that hung out here with a threaded hole on it. I had to cut that off because it was in the way of the bracket getting all the way up to the block. So we're gonna test fit it again, see how it works. But Zach is in here finishing up this front transmission mount. That's what he's doing. And he had to add a support coming across. Make sure it doesn't want to flex any which way. But it's pretty thick. It's what, probably 3/8 I'd say?
Probably.
Yeah, it's pretty thick material, so I don't think it's gonna give us any trouble, but it's gonna go right down there in those holes. That's what he's working on right now. And we're moving pretty steady. I have some parts I need to order tonight and get those on the way this week, but we are moving along. All right, so this is my fuel pressure regulator off the factory Miata fuel rail. I cut the top off of it. I'm gonna put a little piece of metal on the top and weld it to seal it off. I just cut the top off where the little vacuum hose goes, and then I gutted everything, the spring, the diaphragm, everything out of the inside, so that I can just have full return out of the rail right here out to this. And then that goes to my air motive, and it pretty much eliminates this regulator completely. But I don't have to order a custom rail for $180, and I don't have to do anything aftermarket with ordering. I don't even know if that's a thing, but this saves a lot of money on doing it this way. So that's the plan. We're gonna weld this cap up, and then I put my little O-ring back on and stick it back in the rail, and it's ready to go. Got to a good stopping point. I'm just waiting on parts at the moment, so it's kind of we're at a standstill for a little bit. The next few days I'm going to be fabbing up the charge pipe, so I'm gonna have to order some clamps. But this is the old charge pipe that I just threw together to make it work. It never leaked or cracked or anything, so it did its job. But I gotta build charge pipe. I have to get my blow-off valve somewhere in there. I got a huge blow-off valve I'm going to be running, and I got to get my pulley on down there, get the alternator mounted back behind where it goes, and then we'll have to get the turbo feed. Ran, which it's got to run all the way back and underneath the intake where the oil pressure sensor is, and then the drain. I'm going to have to get the drain into the oil pan. I'm thinking I'm gonna go somewhere on the oil pan at a high point and try to get it drained pretty well at like a 45 down underneath. So it should be pretty straightforward. I don't think we'll have a ton of issues with a turbo feed or a drain. The wiring is going to work for now. I do plan on cleaning the wiring up and putting a single bulkhead connector, or maybe even 2 smaller ones, probably over here, just to clean things up, because it's just tacky. The wires just run every which way. But to get it running, we're just going to leave it. We might clean it up a little bit, but for now it'll work, and then later we'll clean it up and go to like a bulkhead connector and tuck all the wires for the injectors and the crank angle sensor, and just kind of bunch them all into one and hide them under the intake, and then run them probably over there. But it'll work for now. Throttle cable is on, and the throttle closes like it's supposed to. I had to adjust the crap out of this, but this is the factory Festiva throttle cable. I just kind of routed it underneath there, and then it loops back and comes back to the throttle body. So that works fine. The fuel pressure regulator is on, the modified regulator, and then we'll be mounting the aeromotive regulator probably back where it was. We might end up doing a different mounting system for it because I don't really like the way those are in there, but we're gonna run this hose probably down and underneath to get up to the regulator here, and just try to keep everything as clean as we can. But flywheel's ordered, it's on the way. I already have the clutch for it, already have the axles. The radiator is a little tight. We're gonna have to do a little bit of modification to get the radiator in there. Somebody told me I'd have to run a Honda half rad to do this swap, and we looked it up, and the dimensions of a Honda half rad are exactly the same height. It's a little thicker, but it's 1 inch narrower, and that's not enough to me to spend the money on a Honda half rad. So we're gonna make that one work, and we're gonna have to modify the bottom tabs. I think we're gonna go ahead and use this, because the radiator sits like basically right up against this. So we'll probably build a little tab off of this and kind of sit it a little ways away, and we might do like a heat shield to keep the heat from the manifold getting too bad into the radiator. That's the plan. The downpipe's gonna suck because the radiator's pretty close over here. We're gonna have to make a really tight 180 to get down and underneath, and then tuck it as close as we can to the block to get underneath and back out the fender. If we go back out the fender, most likely that's the plan. That's the easiest route, rather than having to spend the money on exhaust and run it all the way out the back. So we'll do the fender, and then the wastegate dump, I don't think will be too bad. We'll probably have to come down over here and then do like a 90 to get it up through here, because it's dead on the bottom of the manifold. So the wastegate will shoot it off to the side, and then we'll probably do like a 90 to bring it up and see if we can get it back up out through the hood the way it was. We might have to patch the hood. We're going to be running the same wastegate, the same boost controller setup, same computer. ECU is not changing. Everything should be about the same, just a few odds and ends. Obviously the motor's different, but as far as sensors go, we're running the same coolant sensors. We're still going to be running a 2-bar map sensor, so that'll limit us to 14 pounds of boost basically. But I'm going to keep this on low boost since I've got like an 8-hour drive to Houston. We're going to be doing probably like 6 pounds. We'll keep it turned down. So that's the plan. Fingers crossed we don't have any rods coming out the side of the block on the way the Texas are back, but we're going to keep it on low boost. We're going to put a good bit of fuel in it in boost, and make sure we're not throwing a ton of timing at it, because I'm pretty confident too much timing killed the last motor. Once this thing's running, I can really focus on other toys, other projects. But the Dodge motor's coming together. We're getting there on that. I'm hoping, I'd like to have it in before next month, but I mean, we're waiting on parts, so now's the perfect time. So you guys might get to see some Cummins content. We're getting pretty close on that. So fingers crossed everything goes well. I appreciate everyone that subscribed. You guys are getting me there. I'm trying to get to, 100 is a milestone for me at the moment. We're at 66, I think. The goal's at the moment's 100 subscribers. So if you guys could do that, get me up there, that would be awesome. And we're gonna start doing drag and drives in this thing. That's the plan. So once I get it running and it's dialed in, we're gonna get some different wheels. I'm on a budget, so we're probably gonna do some VMS wheels, which I like the look of VMS wheels. For the price, you can't hardly beat them. And then some slicks, which I had slicks on my Fiesta, and I mean, they work great. They're kind of sketchy to daily it on sometimes, but as long as you're real careful if the road's wet or anything, you're fine. So we'll probably get some slicks on the front of this if we start doing drag and drives and see if we can break some axles. But so far so good. We haven't ran into any major hiccups. It's going pretty smooth. I'll probably have to figure out a bung for the IAT sensor. I'm gonna have to get another bung for the wideband, and then it should be pretty straightforward. I mean, it's going pretty well. So let me know if you guys have any suggestions or advice on what I'm doing wrong or what I could change or do differently. I like to run a smaller battery so we have more room way over here in this corner. So we might end up doing a smaller battery and kind of keep things tucked to where we have all this room for potentially later doing a sidewinder setup. I would like to do a custom manifold to come off of here and mount the turbo over in that open area. So that might be a future thing, but for right now we're looking for functionality. We need it just to work and get us to Texas, but I'm trying to get this done with enough time to where I can get about a week of seat time in it and make sure we're not going to have any major hiccups, because I'm tuning this thing myself. So it's a learning process. I'm learning as I go. It's fun. I enjoy it a lot. So once again, I mean, thanks a ton for all the support. You guys are helping me grow, and that's the ultimate goal here. And I'll probably put up a video soon of me actually doing some powder coating, because I'd really like to powder coat the valve cover on this and the turbo. I'm really digging the copper on the engine bay. So I don't know how well you can see with the lighting, but it's a little dusty, but that's the copper. And of course with the lighting it looks darker and lighter in places, but I'm debating on doing a copper or maybe even like a super nice like metallic teal or something. So I mean, give me a suggestion what you guys think, and I'll probably do the cover for the crank angle sensor and just a few little odds and ends. The wipers are going to be getting powder coated, probably just a flat black so they don't, you know, stand out too crazy much. But let me know what you guys think, and we'll be back when we make more headway on this.